Hello, everyone. Eric Grenier here, and welcome to the 86th episode of the Writ podcast. Joe Biden is in Ottawa, and there will be lots of discussions about U.S. and Canada issues, but there's also going to be the discussion of what's the future for Joe Biden, who has still not yet confirmed whether he'll be running in the next election. So to discuss these relations between our two countries and also what it means for U.S. politics going forward, joined today by Alex Panetta, Washington correspondent for the CBC. Hi, Alex. Thanks for joining me.
Nice to be here.
So we are recording this on Thursday afternoon, so Biden hasn't actually arrived in Ottawa yet, so we can't talk about what's going to come out of these meetings or anything like that. So let's try and keep it broad, and we'll start with just a table setting. What is the state of U.S. Canada relations right now?
I think they're fairly good insofar as there not being any monumental irritants that risk derailing the relationship. So to set the context, let's look back over the last few years. We've had situations where the Keystone Pipeline had defined relations between Ottawa and Washington, and that it risked becoming dysfunctional. Then there was the NAFTA renegotiation, which famously went off the rails a couple of times. There was tweeting against the prime minister. There were irritants early on in the Biden administration. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline, although the Trudeau government didn't make a huge deal of it. And then there was this electric vehicle tax credit, which could have severely dented Canada's auto sector for maybe a generation to come. And that's off the table. So there's still the irritants that are perennial ones, things like softwood lumber is not going to go away. The Americans are not happy about dairy and so on and so forth. But Canada's got its own complaints. But these are manageable things, right? In the grand scheme of things, things are okay. Not to say there aren't frustrations in both capitals with some of the decisions and policies made in either one, but we're not facing a crisis right now. So I'd say it's relatively decent. That said, there are issues, and there are important global events happening, and our two countries are not necessarily on the same page on all of them.
You're right. There's obviously one of the ones that might get some attention in the next couple of days would be what's going on in Haiti, how the United States would like us to be a little bit more involved. There was a poll that I saw out today, and it was actually a comparison done by Leger between how Americans and Canadians felt about it. And Americans were much more keen on Canada sending troops to Haiti than Canadians were of sending Canadian troops to Haiti. And that probably is reflected by the government as well.
Of course. I mean, when you go to a restaurant, an expensive restaurant, everyone's more keen on the other person picking up the bill. But in this particular case, I think there's a general recognition that something has to happen in Haiti, that the security situation there is untenable, that you can't have a government sliding into authoritarianism, the absence of elections, people not able to get basic goods because gangs control the streets, and a prime minister being assassinated, and elections being delayed. It's not tenable. And the U.S. government has turned to Canada, partly because there are not a lot of candidates to take this role, certainly not in our hemisphere. The United States itself has a history of colonizing Haiti, and has literally colonizing Haiti, and also had some controversial interventions in Haiti in the 1990s as well. Then the United Nations, famously linked to the cholera epidemic and also to sexual abuse scandal in Haiti. So the United States, looks at Canada and sees a French-speaking country. Obviously not, not everyone speaks French in Haiti, but it's there's a closer cultural affinity there. So French-speaking country, a country that has experience in Haiti, that's well known in Haiti, that has a large embassy operation there, and that frankly is not carrying the heaviest burden elsewhere in the world. If you look at what's happening in Ukraine and elsewhere, the United States and Ukraine, if you look at a pie chart on how much each country supporting Ukraine's self-defense is providing, the United States it's like the lion's share of that pie chart. And so the thinking in Washington is, look, we're dealing with Taiwan, we're dealing with Ukraine. We have a crisis on our southern border, not just a migration crisis, but some security issues, serious differences with the Lopez Obrador government. I think, Canada, we need you here. And the question then becomes, well, what makes the most sense? And I think the Canadians, with good reason, have been skeptical of this ask. And the Prime Minister himself has made certain suggestions that there could be other steps taken before you get to a multilateral force. And that would be things like, supporting the Haitian police, support for certain migration programs, talking to people at the United Nations and trying to confirm what exactly what UN auspices would govern such a mission. So I mean, it's a complicated scenario. I listen, pundit accountability here. People will know how it turns out when they listen to this podcast. I don't suspect we're getting to a Canadian-led multilateral force this week, but I would expect some announcements on Haiti during the Biden visit.
All right. Well, we'll see, I guess, where that lands. But so this is going to be Biden and Trudeau who will be meeting on various occasions and will be talking to each other. How important is it, that relationship, the Biden-Trudeau relationship, not so much, the United States and Canada, but the personal relationship between the two of them? What's the state of that as far as we know?
Every indication suggests they have some affection for each other. There's obviously a generational difference. Their national interests sometimes conflict with one another. Not often, but occasionally happens. But I think they generally like each other, and the proof is in Biden being here for 2 days. And I don't think he would have come up if he disliked the prime minister. I think, and we've seen it in the past where U.S. presidents have gone long stretches without visiting Canada. I think Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter never came to Canada, and despite I think Carter got along relatively well with Pierre Trudeau, never came. And I think this is the only overnight bilateral visit in 20 something years. So I don't think Biden does that if he harbors any ill will toward Trudeau. He'll be speaking to Parliament. I think I think they generally get along quite well. But that's not to paper over some of the serious substantive disagreements or sources of tension. Haiti being one of them.
It's a sign of Canada being a small country how impressed we are that he's staying overnight, that he's going to be, being at one of our hotels for the evening. That's really a sign that he really likes us. But are there any domestic political things for Biden here? Is this a trip that is primarily about our relationship? It's about maybe even helping out Trudeau, who could use some good news. I'm sure that's a very secondary consideration. But is there anything here that matters to Joe Biden? Not so much how it's going to be heard on this side of the border, but whatever trickles out south of the border, that is important to him domestically.
Well, I would say some of the stories that have been breaking in Canada about Chinese interference could not come at a worse time, because you have Canada's indispensable partner coming to visit, and there is an obsession over China issues in Washington that I don't think Canadians necessarily fully appreciate. I think the conversation, the intensity of the conversation you're starting to see in Ottawa about China has been going on for a couple of years already in Washington. And I'll just give you an example. So it's Thursday afternoon right now. Biden is on his way down. In Congress today, in the U.S. Congress, there are 3 hearings related to China. There's the TikTok hearing. CEO of TikTok is being just raked over the coals, and the United States may ban the most popular social media app with young people in the United States, if depending on how that conversation goes. There's a hearing on Uyghur genocide, and there's another hearing on fentanyl production in China and how and China's role in the opioid crisis in the United States. This is one day, 3 hearings, and this is a constant thing. Every conversation leads there, and so and I was something I've believed for some time now, is that the United States, the way the U.S. perceives its relationship with Canada, is going to be seen through the prism of what do you bring to the table on the issues that we care about now. So when Canada wants to talk about manufacturing or migration or climate change or just about any other issue under the sun, it doesn't take a long, like the old movie 6 Degrees of Separation, it doesn't take a long leap in that conversation to get to the stuff the U.S. is really obsessed with, and China really is at the heart of its preoccupations. And so, having these stories about alleged interference and alleged complicity of MPs is not great timing for Canada, because that's what people are going to notice in the United States. Covering, certainly reporters up here covering the Biden visit. And frankly, the meeting with Trudeau, the trip to Canada, has not been, big news in Washington. You look at the sort of the political playbook for today, the Punchbowl News, they put out their daily newsletters. There's not a single reference to it. Just at the very bottom. It's what's on the agenda today in Washington. At 12 p.m. this happens. At 1 p.m. this happens. At 4 p.m. Joe Biden leaves for Ottawa. 5 p.m. this happens. That's kind of the way. That's the extent of the coverage I've seen today in Washington, and it's kind of indicative of where the U.S. brain is at right now. The situation with Mexico is getting increasingly tense, and like I said, the U.S. is obsessed with China, and it's got its own domestic issues. So Canada is not a top of mind issue right now.
So is it a good trip for Biden if no one notices anything that happens or he says here?
Well, I think if they make, and I suspect, again, people will be able to hold us accountable for this when they see this. So I suspect there'll be some announcements on critical minerals. I've been asking people, will these announcements have to do with commercial news, like supporting companies, or will they have to do with policy to try to get critical minerals out of the ground more quickly? I was told potentially both. And that's a China conversation. That's about lessening our dependence on China. I know that there's some skepticism that Canada will be ready to produce these things in the quantities required to lessen reliance on Chinese-owned companies as the world, moves towards, electric vehicle fleets. So I think that it would be a win if President Biden gets a China-related announcement here related to electric vehicles. Wouldn't be a big political story in the U.S., but it would be a win for him. On the border as well, on migration is a big political problem for Joe Biden. If the United States is trending towards 3 million asylum seekers this year, or close to it. So when people here complain about Roxham Road, and I don't know what it's 50, 60,000, that's just like, well, yeah, ours is exponentially.
Yeah, that's a Wednesday, right?
Exactly, and other countries have a pretty tough situation. In Colombia, handling practically 1/10 of the population of Venezuela is currently in Colombia, and that's because human beings are on the move in ways unprecedented since the Second World War, and through climate crises and conflict and crime and poverty, and frankly, the existence of the smartphone has shown people a better life out there, and so people are on the move, and this is becoming a political liability for President Biden because he's accused of leaving the border completely open, of having reversed some of President Trump's policies, and whether some of those accusations are fair or not, the reality is this is a political situation he has to manage. And so lately, Republicans have started to make some noise about migrants coming in from Canada, right? Which, if you look at the numbers, they're really not that high. Yes, there's been exponential growth, but when you start with like 10 and then you end up with 100, it's gone up 10 times. I'm exaggerating slightly, but they're not very big numbers. And most of what the U.S. calls apprehensions encounters is mostly people being stopped at regular checkpoints because they forgot their passport or didn't have the right work visa. This is not serious stuff. I think something like 8% of CBP border encounters are people being stopped between checkpoints. In Mexico, on the Mexican side, it's something like 90%. So it's reversed, right? Anyway, long story short, Republicans are starting to make hay of this. I think northern state Republican lawmakers kind of want in on the border story, so they've held a press conference and they're getting on Fox News talking about the peril from the north. And it's not a big story down there, but it could provide an opening for this safe third country conversation. And I've seen some analysis here that maybe this will derail safe third country talks. On the contrary, I think this gives Canada some leverage in the conversation because they can say, well, if you want, we can make your problem with the Republicans in northern border states go away. You make our problem go away. And the solution is extending safe third country across the border. So when people come in unlawfully from Canada, send them back to Canada. And when people come in unlawfully to Canada, we send them back to the United States. And so I do believe that in a weird way, the Republicans may have helped get a safe third country agreement, whether or not that was their intention. I'm not even sure that a lot of them actually were aware of this issue. So anyway, that's just something to keep in mind, that it could have been an impetus in speeding up a possible resolution to something that hasn't been a very big deal in the U.S., a safe third country agreement.
Well, let's move on to things that hopefully won't be out of date by a couple of days, and that is the 2024 election. Now, it might seem like a long ways away, but in U.S. politics, the next election is always around the corner. This is Joe Biden's first visit as president. He's been here before as vice president. But whether he gets a second visit might depend on whether he even runs again. And so far, he hasn't gone one way or the other. Like, what's the latest state of whether Joe Biden is going to be, or at least going to try to be, the Democratic nominee?
So just to bridge this conversation from the one we just had about the visit, I will say Joe Biden is older than Ronald Reagan, who had been the oldest U.S. president. And Ronald Reagan is, to my knowledge, the only president since the Second World War, certainly, who's spoken to Canada's Parliament twice. He spoke in 1981 and in 1987. He made a joke at the very beginning that he was back here because he'd won his second term, and he said, unfortunately, I don't think I'll be coming a third time because my constitution precludes it. And I do believe there's a chance Joe Biden might end up eclipsing Reagan's record in terms of like running at an advanced age, and also maybe making a second speech to Canada's Parliament if he's reelected. Every indication I've seen is that he intends to run again. I haven't seen any other political operations ramping up anywhere. Not getting spammed by emails from allies of Pete Buttigieg. Not to say it's impossible that some of these folks might end up throwing their hat in the ring if Biden chooses not to run. But I haven't seen any indication he won't run. I expect he would.
So right now, the assumption is that it will be Biden in 2024. At least that is the safest assumption, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, never say never. In his shoes, I definitely consider whether or not you'd want to do this again because he's going to go through a miserable couple of years now with his family being under the microscope in Congress, his son's business dealings, how they connect to him. It's not going to be an easy couple of years personally for him. And so, if he announced he wasn't running, that would probably end a lot of the interest in these investigations. But I think he's got a fairly extensive legislative track record already. It would, at his age, I think it wouldn't be that hard to say, hey, I'm calling it a day. I think I've done some of the things I wanted to do, and we're done. But I don't think his head's there. I mean, and if it is there, he's certainly keeping his cards close to his chest because neither he or anyone close to him has given any indication that this is what he's thinking. It sounds like he's running again.
Well, is one of the considerations for him whether there's someone better placed to win in the next election? And obviously there's the other factor that he is an older person, obviously. So between now and let's say next spring, there could be health issues that pop up that make the choice for him. But are there other people that could take his place right now that seem like obvious successors?
Yeah, I'll say that the bench is not super stacked in Washington. I mentioned Secretary Buttigieg. There's obviously Vice President Harris, but she always polls worse than everyone else. If you look at a straight, well, this, I'm talking to an expert on polling, but if you look at head-to-head matchups, Kamala Harris never comes out at the top of those head-to-head matchups, and so that's definitely a consideration. Can she win? Okay, so if it's not her, maybe it's Buttigieg, who does poll a little better than her. Although Republicans, I don't think it's an accident, have started pummeling him with negative news. They link him to every issue. Fair enough, it's his file. In the transportation sector, there are problems at airports. They mentioned Buttigieg. The train derailment in Ohio, they tried to make him the face of the issue. Mentioning when he's on leave for family reasons. Fox News stopped inviting him on. He was kind of the Fox News whisperer for the Democratic Party. He would go on and do interviews with them, and came off relatively well. Fox News gave him the hook at some point, and he's no longer invited onto the network. Maybe because he wasn't being helpful to the other team, but clearly Republicans see this guy as a threat, and he's got political chops, which we noticed. I mean, he'd been the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and already clearly demonstrated political talents, and now he's actually spent some time working at the federal level. There's some talk about whether he might be interested in state politics. Maybe in the neighboring state. I wasn't sure if it was Illinois or Michigan. He was rumored to maybe could be considering not Indiana, but moving to a nearby state. Anyway, just kind of rumors right now. But speaking of governorships, I think that's where the Democratic bench is a little stronger. You have, first of all, let's look at Michigan as Exhibit A here. The governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, was relatively easily reelected. It's a swing state. You put up a woman with some political chops from a swing state, a must-win state, and you would assume that if you're the governor of the state, you've been reelected twice, and you run in a national election, your chances are pretty good. That would be a serious, chess piece, claiming an important piece of real estate on that board if Democrats, if she ended up running. So she's probably one of the more compelling candidates. Could it be someone like a Marty Walsh, Labor Secretary, other folks who came out of state or local government. Governor of Louisiana as well is a Democrat. Mayor of New Orleans, Mary Landrieu, former senator's brother. So there's some talent at the state and local level, maybe more than at the federal level. But who knows? Who knows?
Well, if it's not 2024, it's always 2028. I'm sure, especially with someone like Buttigieg, this might be one of the considerations there, that he's still a young man, right? So he'll probably at some point run for president again. Now, on the other side, that's a little bit more interesting, perhaps. So we do have at least a couple candidates who are declared. You have Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. Not, I would say, at equal standing in terms of the polling. How is that shaping up right now? Because it seems pretty clear that Donald Trump is still leading in the polls among Republicans. There's Ron DeSantis. Whether he's going to actually run seems almost obvious, inevitable that he will, based on how he's positioning himself. But it does seem like this is still going to be Donald Trump's to lose, assuming he is not finding himself in criminal trouble between now and nomination day.
I think you're right, and we could talk about the criminal aspect to this as well, if you're interested in whether it hurts or helps, because I think I've heard arguments on both sides. But so, what do we know about the polling at this point? We know that Trump has been ahead nationally from the very start, right, and that he had his worst moment after the midterms, right, when his candidates underperformed. I mean, you look at places like New Hampshire, Georgia, the people Trump endorsed lost, right, or performed worse than other Republicans, like the governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, who got elected by, I forget what it was, but something like 15 or 20 points practically. And whereas the Trumpy Senate candidate loses. It was kind of the same thing in Arizona, where the Trump folks did worse. Georgia, Brian Kemp easily got reelected, whereas Herschel Walker, the folks that Donald Trump backed and promoted didn't do as well. So the argument against him after the midterms was, this guy's a loser. He won the 2016 election, which stunned the entire political universe, partly because it was Democrats seeking a third term. Hillary Clinton was unpopular. The FBI writes a letter that casts aspersions on her 2 weeks before Election Day while early voting's happening. Like, a lot of things fell into place for Donald Trump to get elected. Her emails have been hacked twice, the DNC's and then hers later in the campaign, or her campaign manager, John Podesta's. Trump wins. It's an incredible political achievement. One of the most stunning events in American political history. He won. But then, 2018 midterms, they lose. 2020 election, they lose. 2020 Senate, they lose. 2022 races, he underperforms. So basically, the sort of the tag on him after the election was he's a loser. And the New York Post, some of the Rupert Murdoch properties, tried to promote this line of attack on Trump. And guess what? That's the worst he ever performed. Trump's numbers went down. And then sort of the anti-gravity, the helium is kicked in again, and he's inching back up. The last few months, his numbers are much better again than DeSantis'. These are national numbers. And this is where your expertise in polling is. I want to sort of flip the camera around and ask you, I cannot explain the divergence in numbers you're seeing, not only nationally, but also at the state level. So okay, I've said that Trump has got a huge lead nationally. There's some noise at the state level. I've seen him behind in polls in New Hampshire, like behind DeSantis. But I've also seen Trump ahead by 20 points in other polls from reputable pollsters, University of New Hampshire, I think, maybe not Monmouth. Anyway, like, reputable polling firms are showing gaps of like 25, 30 points. I've never seen this in my life. And so what I'm wondering is, at this point in the cycle, to what extent is this polling to be trusted? And to what extent do we sort of discount these numbers this early on? And if you've got thoughts on that, I'd love to know.
Well, there's two different things. One, it's U.S. politics, right? And things don't move around that much, right? So when you're looking at some of the matchups between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, it's hard to believe that things would actually move all that much between now and 2 Novembers from now, right? Just because everybody has an opinion on Joe Biden, everybody has an opinion on Donald Trump. People have their camps. But on the nominee polling or the primary polling, that one does seem to be a little bit more all over the place, right? Because it does depend on who the pollsters include in their questions, right? Because sometimes they have extra people that haven't declared, sometimes they don't. And I do think that for a lot of Americans, they might not have completely turned their mind to it yet, right? So if you are someone who's going to vote for Ron DeSantis, have you really given that much thought, a year before? But there was some work that I saw was done by Nate Cohn of the New York Times, and he was showing how when you lead even this early in the primary polling, with that kind of numbers that we've seen from Donald Trump, usually around like 40% or something like that, which is matching, I think, his result in the primaries in 2016. Those people usually end up winning. So,
Of course. But
it's when you have the kind of lead, I think that's when it makes a big difference. When you're one of those candidates that's rising from 0 to 15, you're a Ben Carson kind of character. That doesn't hold firm, I don't think.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Nate Cohn, because I was going to say one of his other takeaways that I heard recently was that the Trump's numbers don't make him inevitable. They make him the obvious front runner, but they don't make him inevitable, because you put somebody at 35 to 41%. A, that's not a majority, but B, that also gets that's not too different from Hillary Clinton's numbers entering the 2008 cycle, and she lost. The difference is Hillary Clinton faced a political prodigy, right? A Barack Obama. And there is no obvious prodigy taking on Trump alone, right? And that's the other thing, too. The field's so fragmented. Interesting thing I heard Sununu say a few days ago is he said, okay, because he was asked, are you worried about all these candidates getting in? Because Trump's going to win if you have 14 other candidates. And he said, getting in is not the problem. The problem is them knowing when to get out. And you look at what happened in the 2020 primaries. A lot of Democrats were worried about Bernie Sanders. Certainly the ones in Washington. I think Sanders kind of maybe hurt himself. Some comments he made about. I'm trying to remember now. It had to do with Venezuela, maybe, or Cuba. And it was he had just won the Nevada caucuses, and he was looking kind of inevitable. And then there's this controversy related to socialism, because a lot of Americans can't tell the difference between the socialist government in Norway and the socialist government in Cuba. But so anyway, long story short, he says this, and doubts just start to grow, saying we're going to lose Florida, we can't win Florida, which they didn't win anyway. We got to do something. And so Biden goes out and wins. I mean, he gets endorsed by all the heavy hitters in South Carolina politics, wins the South Carolina primaries. Turnaround happens, and within days, everyone starts dropping out. It was insane. It was like a stack of dominoes falling. Senators who had been running just basically one after another bowed out. Barack Obama got involved. Ended up having a conversation. I'm not sure what they discussed with Pete Buttigieg, but all I know is Pete Buttigieg dropped out immediately and became Secretary of Transportation a few months later. So you have to think that some backroom dealing was happening. And then the question becomes: is there that kind of institutional heft or power left within the Republican Party to do something like that? Is there, are there enough people with the ability to say, okay, you drop out, and we'll sort of make sure we positions for you, and it's just basically DeSantis or one person running against Trump? I don't know that party has that level of cohesion, so they might not be able to do what Obama and others did in 2020. If you ask me who I think would be a compelling candidate that could not only, not sure he'd beat Trump, but he would be a compelling general election candidate, Tim Scott of South Carolina. He's starting to make noises about possibly running. He stopped doing interviews in the hallways of Congress, which is always a sign of something happening. Usually, because most members of Congress they're very happy to talk to the press in the hallway, and this now suddenly he's no longer readily available to us. And then the question is, okay, is he getting ready to make some sort of announcement? Tim Scott is a very different candidate, right? Trump won in 2016 on culture war and just these blistering attacks on the establishment. And he kind of created not only a a political a new framework, but also a policy framework. I've looked at all the old speeches former presidents gave in the House of Commons over the years, and it's just funny how the themes um, seem outdated now, but especially on trade, right? Everyone just constantly singing the praises of free trade. The second Trump got elected, now it's like, yeah, everyone acknowledges that there's some damage too in international commerce, especially related to China. So, all that to say, Trump has basically scrambled the playbook. Every single other Republican candidate kind of tries sounding a bit like him. Tim Scott is one who doesn't sound like him. Tim Scott is an affable person. He's a happy warrior, expressing gratitude for the great things that this country's given his family, lifted it out of poverty. An old kind of sunny Reagan type Republican. Obviously, not to you want to caricature people because it's been 35 years, so obviously his policies would be a bit different. But it would be the one who's running completely separate from the Trump model. I think Mike Pence is a little different too, but he's associated with Trump. Anyway, long story short, I think Tim Scott would be an interesting candidate, an African American, just a cheerful person, totally different, very conservative, but not this angry culture war type conservative. And it would, I look, I don't know if I think he'd have a great chance of winning a general election. I don't know how he'd do in the primaries. I just know that it would be, I would love to see what happens if he runs. I'd just love to see what the results were.
Well, and we'll just wrap up, I guess. But when we're talking about the Republican primary and if anybody else can win it, I do wonder what happens if anybody else did win it. It's hard to imagine Trump not finding himself somehow involved in the next election. If the U.S. electoral system can rig an election and rob him of victory, I'm not sure he's going to give a lot of credit to a Republican establishment keeping him out of the nomination.
Yeah, So he's kind of like, it's like dealing with a human suicide vest. It's like either we make peace with you and no one gets hurt, or you blow us up. It's a tough partnership to be in when you're basically scared of the guy. So, and we were talking earlier about the possibility of criminal charges. If it happens, I mean, I've heard excellent arguments on both sides about whether it hurts him, it helps him in the primary process. I don't think it helps him in a general election. I don't think there are a lot of swing voters who say, "Wow, I love it that he's been indicted. I'm going to vote for him this time, even though I didn't last time." I don't think that happens, especially after January 6th, right? The last election, which he lost by 7 million votes, was pre-January 6th. Now, a Trump supporter might say, "Well, that was before Americans had 4 years of Joe Biden. Maybe they might not like inflation or other things." Anyway, long story short, I don't think he's as good a general election candidate as he is a primary candidate. And I've heard arguments that getting charged confirms the nomination for him because it makes the entire conversation about him and are you with him or against him. It polarizes the entire thing in a way that he wins. I've also heard the argument that Republicans want to win, and if they start to see his poll numbers dip nationally in a general election scenario, and maybe an arrest would do that. I don't know that for a fact, but maybe it would. Well, that maybe recreates the scenario post-November that we were talking about earlier, where people start to worry he might be a loser, and they start to look for an alternative. Who knows? And getting back to our earlier conversation about the polling at this stage in the race, it's so early in the cycle. I mean, who thought Donald Trump would win in 2016 at this stage in the cycle? But Joe Biden went from the front runner to dead to the winner, and I think that a lot of things can happen between now and next spring.
Well, you're visiting Ottawa from your base in Washington. Even with everything that's going on in Canada, it must seem like the politics here remain a bit quaint.
Increasingly combative, I have to say. Some of the political. I know anything happens in the United States happens here a few years later, from fundraising tactics to messaging tactics. Liberals and NDPers borrow tactics you see in the United States. Everything from substantive issues that they raise to, a politician standing in front of the sort of the bleacher, stadium seating thing, where like what Obama introduced in 2008, to Jack Layton rolling up his shirt sleeves. from everything from policy to optics, and it happens on the Republican side too with the conservatives. So yeah, it's Canadian politics will never be entirely different from American politics, even if there is sometimes, fortunately, in my opinion, a respectable distance.
All right. Well, a scary preview of things to come in Canada, then, I guess, was what I was seeing in the United States.
That's not a January 6th reference, by the way. I'm just saying. But there's short sleeves are a little more innocuous.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll just leave it at that then. All right. Well, it's still going to be lots of news over the next couple of days, but the U.S. presidential cycle is still very, very early, though even by American standards, we're already well into it. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Alex. I know it's going to be a busy couple of days, so thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Eric.